before the world called me Africa. I was already ancient, before Greece wrote myths and Rome built walls. I had carved my legacy in stone and stars. I am the Nile, the eternal river that whispered secrets to the sun. I gave birth to Kemet, the land you now call Egypt. It was from my waters that pyramids rose, aligned with the heavens, built by minds unchained by time. Here, science was not foreign. Medicine healed wounds long before Hippocrates was born. My daughters charted the skies. My sons wrote in symbols called Medu Netjer, sacred words, the world's first language of light. They tell you pyramids were tombs, but they were time capsules, echo chambers of eternal thought. They say aliens built them because they cannot imagine that black hands could shape heaven from stone. To the south, I bore mighty children, Kush, Nubia, Aksum, nations carved in gold and granite. They traded across oceans, stood defiant, ruled with wisdom. They were not lost tribes, they were legacies. In Kush, queens sat on thrones and led armies. In Aksum, obelisks scraped the skies. In Nubia, iron clanged like thunder, and temples glowed under the sun. And Ethiopia, Ethiopia, land of lions and prophecy. You were never conquered. You held the ark of memory, the sacred drumbeat of time. The world forgets. They teach you that Africa waited for discovery. But I remember when the world came to me, to learn, to trade, to be born. I am the cradle, not just of man, but of mind. My soil grew astronomers, my rivers fed scribes and healers, my winds carried the whispers of the first civilizations. They erased me from textbooks, but they cannot erase me from truth. I am the first. I am the beginning. I am Africa, and my story is just beginning to be told. Long before Europe knew the meaning of the Renaissance, Africa was glowing with brilliance. In the West African plains, mighty kingdoms rose: Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, centers of wealth, power, and unmatched scholarship. The Empire of Ghana, not to be confused with the modern state, was the earliest. Rich in gold, it earned the name Land of Gold from Arab traders. Its rulers built armies, taxed commerce, and ruled with dignity. Then came Mali, a realm so prosperous that its king, Mansa Musa, became a legend across the world. In 1324, he journeyed to Mecca with a caravan of gold so vast it disrupted economies across North Africa. He wasn't just rich, he was wise. Mansa Musa built mosques, libraries, and schools. And most famously, he planted the seed for something sacred: Timbuktu. Timbuktu wasn't just a city, it was a beacon of knowledge. Students from across Africa and the Middle East came to study astronomy, medicine, law, and philosophy. Its libraries held thousands of manuscripts, a legacy of African literacy and intellectual tradition. And then there was Songhai, rising after Mali's decline. Under kings like Askia Muhammad, Songhai became one of the largest empires in African history. Its legal system, universities, and trade stretched from the Sahara to the forests of the south. While the world believed Africa was silent, she was speaking in numbers, poetry, architecture, and law. This was Africa's golden age, a time of kings and queens, scribes and scholars, wealth and wisdom. Let the world remember, Africa was never behind. She was simply ahead, before she was interrupted. But But no golden age lasts forever, and Africa's light was not dimmed by her own doing. It was interrupted. The drums of the continent fell silent beneath the weight of ships and steel. Colonizers came, not to learn, but to take. With maps drawn in distant lands, they divided nations, disregarding tribes, languages, and centuries of unity. The scramble for Africa wasn't a race, it was a robbery. Europe carved Africa like a feast. Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium. They brought flags, but not freedom. They extracted gold, diamonds, rubber, and lives. And worst of all, they stole people. Millions of sons and daughters, mothers and warriors, ripped from their roots, shipped across oceans in chains. But Africa did not submit in silence. From the forests of Angola to the highlands of Kenya, from the Ashanti in Ghana to the Zulu in South Africa, resistance flamed. Leaders like Samurai Touré, Ya Asantewa, and Shaka Zulu stood tall. They knew Africa's soil was sacred, and it would not be conquered without a fight. Though the colonizers came with guns, Africa stood with spirit. Yes, her back was bent, but her soul remained unbroken. They came not for trade, not for peace, but for people. Africa's sons and daughters were captured, chained, and sold. Millions taken from their homes, their lands, their families. This was not migration. It was abduction. The transatlantic slave trade was one of history's darkest storms. Over 400 years, more than 12 million Africans were shipped across the ocean, stacked like cargo, branded like animals, treated like property. But even in chains, Africa's spirit refused to die. There were rebellions on ships, Africans who rose in blood and fire before ever reaching foreign shores. There were uprisings on land, like the Maroons in Jamaica, the Palmares in Brazil, and Haiti, where enslaved Africans became revolutionaries and led the only successful slave revolt in history. Names like Toussaint Louverture, Nanny of the Maroons, Zumbi dos Palmares, and countless unnamed warriors. They fought, they bled, they resisted. Africa may have been shackled, but her soul never bowed. Even when stripped of her language, her drums silenced, and her gods forbidden, she found ways to survive. Through stories, through song, through spirit. The chains were heavy, but the will to be free was stronger. Africa bled, but she still stood. Just as the chains of slavery were beginning to loosen, another storm gathered: colonization. In 1884, in a cold hall in Berlin, Germany, European leaders met to divide a land they did not own. Not a single African voice was present, but maps were drawn, borders carved, nations split like slices of bread. This was the Berlin Conference, and it launched what would be known as the Scramble for Africa. France, Britain, Belgium, Germany, Portugal, and others. They came with flags, missionaries, and rifles. They claimed lands as if they were prizes. They declared protectorates, colonies, and spheres of influence. Africa's kingdoms, cultures, and tribes were ignored. Borders cut through ethnic groups, languages, and histories. The wounds of those lines are still felt today. Colonizers brought railroads, yes, but they were built to extract, not connect. They introduced Western schools, but taught Africans they were inferior. They brought churches, but demonized the gods that had guided Africa for millennia. Africa became a battlefield of resistance and control. From the Zulu resistance in the south, to Samurai Toure in the west, to Menelik II of Ethiopia, who stunned the world by defeating Italy at the Battle of Adwa. Not all of Africa was conquered. Ethiopia stood free, and so did the African spirit.
Then she spoke. Then she shouted, "This was the fire of freedom." From the Gold Coast of Ghana, a voice rose. "Kwame Nkrumah," he said, "seek ye first the political king." He dreamed of a united Africa, strong, proud, and free. In the Congo, another voice burned bright. Patrice Lumumba. Brilliant, uncompromising. He gave the Belgian colonizers back their chains and demanded dignity. But freedom had a price. They feared his vision. So they silenced him. But they could not erase his dream. In South Africa, under the shadows of apartheid, young students took to the streets. One of them, a man of mind and courage, was Steve Biko. He told his people, "The most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." He awakened a generation and paid with his life. Across the continent, flames of resistance erupted. Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, who rode a bicycle, planted trees, and told his people to reclaim their destiny. Julius Nyerere in Tanzania, who preached African socialism, unity, and humility. Nelson Mandela, locked in a cell for 27 years, but emerging without hatred, only vision. These were not perfect men, but they were flames in the dark, bringers of dawn, and beside them stood women, often forgotten yet never silent. Funmilayo, Ransom Kuti, Ya Asantewa, Wangari Maathai. Their voices shook palaces. Africa was rising, not just with guns, but with ideas, music, books, and unity. Pan-Africanism was no longer a whisper, it became a drumbeat, a march, a song of return, of restoration, of resistance. Africa was no longer a colony. She was becoming a continent of nations. One by one, the flags of empire were lowered, and the flags of freedom were raised. Ghana, 1957. Nigeria, 1960. Kenya, 1963. Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. The list grew. The people spoke. And Africa began to stand. But independence was only the first step. The wounds of colonization ran deep, and building unity was no easy task. Kwame Nkrumah dreamed of a United States of Africa. He saw the future. One currency, one army, one voice. But the chains of division were not easily broken. Borders drawn by Europeans became battlegrounds. Tribalism, coups, corruption. They dimmed the dream but never killed it. Still, the spirit of Pan-Africanism refused to die. In 1963, leaders from across the continent gathered in Addis Ababa. They formed the Organization of African Unity, a step toward solidarity, a call for African problems to have African solutions. And across the diaspora, the children of Africa, in the Americas, the Caribbean, Europe, looked homeward. They wore kente. They raised their fists. They reclaimed their names. Africa became a global idea, not just a place. A mother whose voice called out to her scattered children. The drums beat once again. The fire still burned, and though the road ahead was long, Africa was walking it on her own feet. Africa's story didn't end on her soil. She was scattered like stars across the ocean. They took her sons and daughters to the Americas, the Caribbean, Europe, and tried to erase their memory. But memory has roots. In chains, Africa sang. In plantations she prayed. In Harlem she danced. In Kingston she chanted. In London she marched. From the sorrow of slavery came the sound of jazz, reggae, hip-hop, soca, blues, gospel. From pain came poetry, Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, Chinua Achebe, James Baldwin, voices that reached back across the Atlantic calling home. Black identity became a journey, not just of skin, but of soul. In America, the civil rights movement rose. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. They carried the spirit of Africa even if they had never walked her soil. In the Caribbean, leaders like Marcus Garvey told the world, a people without the knowledge of their past is like a tree without roots. In the UK, black communities faced racism and struggle, but built power through culture, resistance and pride. The afro became a crown. The fist became a symbol. Black is beautiful became a revolution. The diaspora was never lost, just longing, never broken, just building. And now they return, with music, with movement, with memory. Africa lives in the streets of Brooklyn, the hills of Jamaica, the corners of Brixton, and the heart of every child who dares to say, I am African, no matter where I stand. Africa is no longer a story of the past. She is now. She is alive. Yes, the wounds remain. Poverty, corruption, conflict, children without schools, mothers without hospitals, nations rich in gold, oil, diamonds, yet poor in justice. But look again. Look closer. In Lagos, coders are building the next tech giants. In Nairobi, startups are solving real problems. In Kigali, drones deliver medicine to rural villages. In Accra, artists blend tradition with digital fire. In Johannesburg, filmmakers tell African stories for the world to see. The youth are not waiting. They are creating. Movements rise. End SARS. Fees must fall. Pan-African unity. Women are leading. Diaspora is returning. Culture is booming. Afro beats, Nollywood, Black Twitter, fashion, football, innovation. This is not the Africa they show in charity ads. This is the real Africa. Complicated, beautiful, fierce. And the vision is still alive. A connected Africa. A strong Africa. An Africa that remembers her past but owns her future. So, we ask, what comes next? Not just for governments, but for the people. For you. For us. Because the story of Africa isn't just what happened. It's what we do from this moment on. Africa, your story has been long, wounded, interrupted, scattered, but never silenced. You have fought, you have bled, you have survived. Now, it is time to unite. No more borders drawn in Europe. No more tribes turned against each other. No more fear of our own reflection. You are one people, from the Nile to the Cape, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. You are the mother of humanity and the future of the world. Your children are everywhere. In Chicago, in Kingston, in Paris, in Rio. And they are listening. They are watching. They are coming home, not just with feet, but with purpose. It is time to build, time to teach, time to love ourselves enough to be whole. Let us rise with one voice. Let us dream with one mind. Let us walk with one heart. Let the world hear. Africa is not divided. Africa is not weak. Africa is rising. And she is one.